Hello, everybody, and I'm back with episode 3 of Cars, Life, and Everything in Between. Today's episode is an in-between with a very special guest, and actually my first guest. His name is Dr. Edward Richter. He's an emergency medicine doctor working in the ER, and why I have him on today is, well, first, he has lots of fascinating stories to tell, and also, this episode's kind of dedicated to all of my friends and everyone else out there who's in the medical field. And I know a lot of you guys are in med school, PA, nursing, PT school, and from what I've gathered is, unfortunately, your lives can be a living hell sometimes. So I kind of wanted him on to maybe bring some solace to you guys and kind of talk about what he does and where his path has led him. And that knowing that with all the delayed gratification that you guys are going through, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Also, be sure to stick around to the end. He kind of cogently brings everything that he talks about together and also kind of shares a message about stuff that's near and dear to his heart about suicide prevention and sex trafficking. So if you're watching this on Facebook, go to the comments below. You'll find the link to the YouTube page. And if you just want to listen to the audio while you're traveling or in your car or wherever, you can find me on Spotify. As always, like, subscribe, leave comments below. And also, if any of your friends are in the medical field or anyone you know would like to listen to this, please share this. It would mean the world to me. So, without further ado, enjoy the episode. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, Eddie.
Hey, Stevie.
Yeah. What's up?
Nothing.
All right.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being on here. So you are my first guest to be on this
All
podcast.
right.
The last two have been Zafe and I just riffing, getting drunk, being foolish.
Cherry poppin' guest.
Yeah, there we go. So now it's serious. Always serious on here.
Great.
So why I wanted you on today and why I think you would be a great guest for my little in-between episodes. You are an ER doc.
Correct.
Yeah. So what exactly, and to everyone out there, Eddie is my brother-in-law, married to my lovely sister. Mm-hmm. And it's an honor that you are in my family.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Glad to have a brother finally.
Yeah, there we go. So you are an ER doc, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What is your full title exactly?
So my full title is Dr. Edward Richter, D.O., which means Doctor of Osteopathy.
Oh, gotcha.
And so there's MD and DO. Essentially the same thing, except for I can also manipulate your bones and muscles.
That's if someone's crunches their leg and you can manipulate those and
Sure can.
fix it as best as possible.
Sure can.
Cool. Okay. So your path to going to medical school is pretty interesting, very hard, putting through the ringer as everyone in the medical industry, and which is another reason I wanted you on here. I have a lot of friends in going into MD, PA, nursing, and they're kind of all in their mid stages, midway through school, 2 years or so, 2 to 3 years through, and it's hell. So I kind of wanted you on here to talk about what it is you do, what got you there, your path, and everything. So starting from undergrad.
So went to undergrad at Loyola University. In undergrad, I went to Loyola because it had a good pre-med program. I knew I wanted to do medical school since I was a child. Was pretty sick when I was a kid growing up, asthma. Was intubated multiple times, which essentially means I was put on a ventilator to breathe due to asthma. And so I was around hospitals a lot when I was a young child. That kind of always made me feel comfortable when I was there because I always got better when I was there. When I got older, kind of volunteered at hospitals, and that made me say, hey, I want to do something in medicine. Also loved science, so decided med school was like the proper course for me. From Chicago, Loyola seemed like the proper fit for me, so decided on Loyola. Did undergrad there. I did the traditional route, so there's what's called the pre-med route. That is not by any means a major. There's not like you can go to an office and say, hey, my major is pre-med. Pre-med is just something that we say. You can actually major in anything. The majority of medical school matriculates will major essentially in biology, chemistry, something of a science or a bachelor in science. Nowadays, I would say more untraditional untraditional pathways are taken, so people will major in literature but will still want to do pre-med. So you can be pre-med and you can major in Russian lit if you want. I just chose biology because, well, damn, I like biology.
Yeah. Well, you can major in Russian lit.
You can major in anything.
Anything.
You can major in communications. You can major, sociology, anything you want. Arts. I have a friend that did art history, specifically Russian's on my brain, but Russian art history.
Okay.
And they are a doctor, neurologist, more cerebral than me.
Yeah. Huh. I didn't know that.
Yep. That is the thing a lot of people don't know, but you do need to cover the core classes. So everybody, if you're going into pre-med, you need to cover biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, all those prerequisites to get into medical school. And then whatever you do on your side terms is what you can do. So for me, I was biology major. I did a chemistry minor. The only reason why I did it was not because I love chemistry. I actually fucking hated chemistry, but I did it because I only needed to take 2 more classes and it looked really good on my resume. So I did a chem minor. I did a lot of courses over the summer because I lived right next to school and I'm also a local boy, so it was easy for me to not have to travel home. So I was able to graduate a year early. My mother stated, "Hey, you're graduating a year early. That's great. You get to work for me for a year." And I said, "Screw that." I told her I had more classes to do, and I ended up getting a minor in photography and a minor in film my last year. So, as I said, you can pursue other things while you're in undergrad, and a lot of people don't know that.
Huh? Okay.
Sidebar to all that, yeah.
Yeah. No. You answered that question. Yeah. No. That is pretty interesting. Yeah. The same. I know one person who did engineering, like me, systems, and now they're in med school.
Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of people that'll do. What kind of engineering was it?
It was my major, systems, and she did a secondary field engineering in biological engineering.
Okay.
And now,
and that's what I was saying. So a lot of people will do engineering, and they'll want to go the chemical route or the biological route to either do any sort of research, which is a big aspect that people don't talk about. People say, "Hey, you're going to med school, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to treat patients," but there's a whole other research side and a whole other R&D basically of medicine that a lot of people don't know about.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And then after undergrad, Florida, correct?
Correct. So I, as I said, I was for the most part pretty traditional biology, chemistry, did some fun things my last year because I didn't want to work. I actually took a year off in between medical school matriculation and undergrad. I, at the time, was playing a lot of poker. It was when the World Series of Poker was actually really big. So if you're a poker fan out there, you'll remember like Fossil Man. This was around that era when it was really getting on TV and everything. I played a lot of home games my last year in college because I was, taking fun classes and it wasn't as stressful. I got into med school, so I knew what was going on. I had a pathway. Home games turned into online turned into amateur online, and losing money turned into making money turned into, hey, I'm going to take a year off of med school because I'm making a lot of money playing poker. So I turned semi-professional internet poker player. I was like top 15% in the nation for about a year and a half, made good money, and I paid all my undergrad loads off with it. So, you go to college, you maybe play poker for a year. And next step is to go to medical school. Prior to getting into medical school, you do got to take a couple tests, all your entrance exams, things of that nature for school. But the one that's really big is called the MCAT. And the MCAT basically has different sections on there. I won't go into the details of it. If you're looking into medicine, you know all about the MCAT. But the MCAT is basically this kind of like the ACT or the SAT for college, but for medical school. It's one of the ways that they grade you and they look at you on top of GPA, extracurricular activities, and volunteering and stuff. So take the MCAT the year that you're going to apply. I took it. I did well in it. I applied to medical school, and as I said, I deferred for a year. So, deferring was probably a really good thing. I would suggest doing it.
Yeah, I know a couple friends that have taken a year off and now they're just starting their second year or they're in their third year. All of them have said that they wish they took more time off.
Yeah, I actually wish I took another year off. When you go from pre-med pathway, Loyola was great. I chose it because it was a very small group. It wasn't 300 people in one big class. They have a pre-med path where it's 20 people, per group, and you have small classes. So it didn't feel as cutthroat, but I know a lot of my colleagues basically said, even undergrad was horrible. I had a great undergrad experience. I just studied all the time. I wasn't your typical person. I would go out Thursday and Friday, but I wasn't, out all the time. Until I got into medical school. Once I got into medical school, then shit hit the fan, and I went out like every night. But
which is usually the opposite. Most people I know in medical school just kind of become recluses and disappear.
Yeah, it was. I got in. I knew what I was going to do. I had my pathway. I knew that. I mean, you know me personally. I pretty much I'm on top of my shit. I get my stuff done. I don't procrastinate, so I study all day and I go out at night. That's basically what I did.
Yeah.
So same thing in college, essentially, which, to the chagrin of a lot of my fellow students, especially in medical school, they were like, "How are you not failing?" I'm like, "Well, I do study. You just don't see it."
Yeah.
So there's that cutthroat nature that I'm talking about. Yeah.
And this was during the first 2 years? Well, because then you go into doing rounds.
Yeah, so to back up then, I took a year off. I ended up going into medical school. I decided I needed to leave Chicago. Essentially just wanted to get away. So I took Florida because I was like, hey, I liked vacationing down there and it was warm. And I was like, if I'm going to study, I'm going to do it on the beach and palm trees. Never actually did that. I just studied in a library. But the first 2 years of medical school are basically clinical. So the first year is essentially 4 years of college put into one semester. So biostats, biology, anatomy, everything that you probably learned a little bit of in undergrad on a pre-med course is essentially, hey, here it is in one semester, deal with it, and don't fail. It's kind of like the weed out semester. Second semester, it gets a little bit more specific as far as classes go, maybe neuroanatomy, microbiology, but just using microscopes for the entire semester in that class, things of that nature. Second year, you're more organ-based. So our bodies have a bunch of organs, right? And so we break it down into systems, nephrology, nephrology or neurology or cardiology. So you'd have a month course of cardiology and you'd learn every single thing about cardiology. And then the next month would be neurology, every single thing about neurology. So that's pretty much all of second year. Second year, they also start introducing you to patients, walking around the hospital, things of that nature, but you don't have much responsibility when it comes to that. Then third and fourth year is when you start doing what's called your clinical. So third year, it's pretty set and structured. The schools say you have to do this clinical. You have to do a family practice. You have to do a general surgeon clinical. You have to do, blah, blah, blah. So third year's learning all the basics, learning how a hospital system works. Fourth year is kind of where it gets fun. Fourth year is, hey, I'm kind of interested from what I've been seeing in my third year. I really like emergency medicine in my case, or I really like OB-GYN, or, oh my God, I cannot stand surgery. There's no absolute way I'm going to do it. So you kind of cross things off your list or circle a few things to kind of tailor your fourth year. So for me, fourth year, I was very interested in family medicine. I wanted to do something in primary care. Just because as I was a child, primary care was very big for me and people helping me with my asthma. So I was initially family medicine, and after being brought into the emergency department on my rotation, my mandatory rotation, I absolutely fell in love with it and completely changed my track, which was kind of a scramble for me.
What year did you change the track?
Halfway through my fourth year, essentially, I said, I'm actually not going to do family medicine. I'm going to do emergency medicine. So then you have to do what's called audition rotations. I have to show myself and that I'm a good student to get into a residency program. Problem with that is everyone else already knew what they wanted to do. And so all the spots to show myself on an audition rotation were filled up. So I had to scramble and kind of figure it out. Able to get spots, did a lot in Chicago and in the Midwest area where I knew I wanted to be, and ultimately landed in Cleveland.
Now, with your first and second year, just doing kind of clinical courses, when did you, so third and fourth years were kind of like rotation start?
Correct, yeah.
And so from studying, so a lot of my friends are in their second or third year at the moment. And one of their questions before I was talking to someone, she wanted to know, like, what did you do to just keep sane? A lot of my friends are very stressed out right now.
Yeah.
They're they have a few week break over the summer between semesters, and they're like, whew, and then starting up, there's like, dude, goodbye, I'm gonna die. So what did you do? So what was the light at the end of the tunnel for you during that stage?
So anybody out there that's kind of in the process right now, it's described as hell. It's one of the hardest professions to obtain and to get to. I never considered it hell. I considered it very tough. I would call it more delayed gratification. If you're good with delayed gratification, it's a profession. And of course, if you like science and helping people, then it's a profession for you. For me to get through it, I just had to keep thinking, hey, eventually I'll be doing what I want to do. I just had that mindset in my head saying, eventually, 3 more years, I'll be residency. 4 more years, I can move back home, I can be with my family, and I can treat patients. 5 more years, I can maybe be, assistant director of a hospital or of an emergency department. So you kind of just think that way. But you're talking, most people's, foresight is not 5 years. It's maybe 3 months. It's maybe 1 year. So it's a lot of delayed gratification. Day-to-day coping. Florida was a tough move for me. I loved vacationing there. I absolutely hated living there. I had a couple good close friends, which you obviously have met, that kind of kept me sane. We would go out, typical guy stuff when you're mid-20s, play video games, drink a couple beers, go out to a bar, things of that nature. The big thing for me, I would say, that really kept me sane was I had a dog, which sounds insane because you're studying all these hours and you're working 30-hour rotation shifts sometimes. But I had a roommate so we split the dog. My dog was a big help. My now wife was also awesome. She would come down and visit Florida every 3 weeks. We were long distance. That was a huge thing, was the social support from her. And then honestly, getting away from everything medicine. So me and my one buddy essentially would not hang out with a whole lot of people. I know that sounds very isolated and, oh my God, what's up with this guy? He doesn't want to play along with med school people. But when you get in that culture, everyone talks about all the time is medicine. So step away from it, go to a park, don't talk to anybody, put your phone down, and just do something for you. For me, it was playing basketball. So I just would go to a gym that wasn't associated with my hospital or with my medical school, so I wouldn't see anybody. And I would talk to other random people that had nothing to do with medicine. And it was nice to, BS about sports or, someone read a book or something like that. Instead of, hey man, did you hear, Dr. So-and-so's test is going to be this and that. It weighs on you a little bit. But get away and find another hobby. Don't make it your life.
Yeah. So that your hobby is basketball.
Yep.
Yeah. You're a big basketball guy.
I am. 6'3".
6'3", yeah.
I've yet to get you on the court. Keep making excuses.
I don't want to embarrass you, man.
Yeah.
All my years of skateboarding and gymnastics go right into basketball, obviously.
Yeah.
So
there's that new basketball hybrid sport where you use skateboards and then you get on the trampoline and jump and dunk. Yeah. I heard of that.
If you want to join me on the court, we can do that.
Sounds good.
We'll be good. So that was med school, 4 years. So then starting residency, going through your 3rd, 4th year. So once you chose emergency medicine, that was your 4th year.
So in order for you have to match. Have you heard of any of your friends in the medical field talk about matching? So we do those audition rotations, right? And those audition rotations are essentially me showing myself to a residency, being like, hey man, you want me to be your buddy for 4 years and you teach me medicine and pay me a tiny bit of money and I work insane amount of hours for you. And if they like you and you think that the program's a fit and you'll benefit from it, you guys match. And so there's what's called match day. And essentially it's when the night before, put my list together and I say, okay, I really like this program, this program, this program. I rank them, 1 through how many programs it is. The programs do the same thing with students. They say, I really like this student, this student, this student. I think that they really liked us, so we're going to rank them high. And if you match, you match, and then you go to that program starting in the fall, essentially. If you don't match, there's something called a scramble. And a scramble essentially means that, okay, you got an email that said, I didn't match. Tough. What do I do about it? Well, some people, actually a lot of people don't match, especially the very sought after specialties, radiology, dermatology, orthopedics. They're sought after essentially because lifestyle wise they're pretty good. They pay really well, and the residency programs tend to be a little bit more lax, with the exception of ortho. That's a pretty tough one. So, there are a lot of people that don't match. It doesn't mean that they're a bad student or that they were a bad, rotator or anything like that. There's just not enough spots for physicians to match, okay? So you would scramble 2 days later and hopefully get a spot. If you don't scramble, then you have to do it all over again. Next year, you do what's called a traditional year. I essentially matched. I wanted to do emergency medicine. I fell in love with a program that was in Ohio. Kate, at the time we were dating, probably been about 4 years. Yeah, 4 years we were dating. She really wanted me to be in Chicago, but also said, pick what's the best program for you. So I picked what I thought was the best program for me, and that was Ohio. And that's how I ended up in Ohio.
Okay. And what was the hospital you worked at, Ohio?
It was called St. John's Medical Center. It's a university hospital affiliate. So that was my residency there. And then I stayed after for work, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. How long is residency?
It depends. So if you were to say, I want to do research, then you can basically do a 1-year traditional intern year, and then you can go out into the world and do research. I have a friend that does that, and he does biopharmaceutical research. Okay. The others vary, basically 3 to 6 years depending. So a family practice doctor would have a 3-year residency. A neurosurgeon is looking at 6 years after medical school. So you're talking 4 undergrad, right? 4 high school, 4 undergrad, 4 residency, right? You're 12 right there, and then another 6 years right there. 18 years to become what you want to be. Oh, that's fucking delayed gratification.
Yeah, I took 5 years of undergrad, and that's enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just not. I haven't found anything I'm passionate about, but brain surgeon. But also they make a lot of sacrifices to save a lot of people.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for every physician, but especially someone that wants to pursue something like neurosurgery. I mean, that is, I couldn't imagine 6 years. 4 years was enough for me. So to answer your question, my residency program was 4 years. Most ER programs are 3 years to 4 years. It just depends. When I was starting, I would say it was a coin flip. 50-50 were 3 years, and then the other 50 were 4 years. But they're starting to move towards 4 years, and that's just because of the wealth of information we have. Eventually, 1 of 2 things is going to happen with med school is they are either going to do like Europe, and in Europe and a few other countries, you go to undergrad, and after a few years of undergrad, not a full 4-year, you get put into a medical school program, and you're already tailored to what you want to be, what type of physician you want to be. So it cuts down the length of time. The other pathway that it may take is that, hey, we just have more information, and we're never going to cut down school. You're just going to have to go to more school. I think it's probably going to go that way, unfortunately.
Cut down school?
No, more school.
Okay,
yeah,
not the European program. Okay.
Yeah, more school. And that has to do with student loans and big business and everything else.
Yeah. You went. I have some notes here, and you already went right to the end. I was going to ask you where the medical field's going and how school's going to be changing, but with med school. 2 of the biggest questions I got were, what did you see? So once you went through residency or in residency, what did school prepare you for? And what did school did not prepare you for?
So medical school is, and this may sound bad, I guess, because you're paying a shit ton of money for it, but was going through the motions to get a piece of paper to finally learn in residency. I learned how to speak medicine in medical school. So I learned the lingo. I know that a kidney doctor is called a nephrologist. I'm not going to get into specifics, but just an example,
mm-hmm.
right? You just know how to speak. So if I was to speak to a colleague, I can say, hey, this person has a perirectal abscess, 3 by 5 centimeters, loculated fluid, complex, touching the sphincter, has a fever and a white count of 12 with a shift, and electrolyte panel shows that he also has an acute kidney injury because he's dehydrated because he's not drinking. Everyone that I speak to in the medical field knows what the heck I'm talking about, right? If I speak to a lay person about that, they go, huh? So I have to speak to the patient and say, hey, you have gross stuff in your butthole and we have to drain it with a knife, okay? So that's what medical school prepares you for, is how to talk to patients and how to talk to other physicians and how to be, for lack of better words, two-faced with it, right? I need to talk to a layperson, but I also need to describe accurately and objectively to someone over the phone what my problem is and why I'm consulting them or why I'm talking to them or why I want to admit them. The other thing med school kind of teaches you for is to be a robot. So in rotations, you are essentially just, this is what you need to do it, and this is the way that we've always done it, and if something changes, we'll let you know. And it's fine because you want a physician that's consistent and knows exactly what to do in every single case. What med school doesn't prepare you for is when you actually have a case that you've never seen before. That's more of what we call the art of medicine, and that's where residency comes in. And residency is essentially, and I would say a lot in my case, because the more patients I see, the more experience I have, but in everybody's case, the more you see, the more you know. There's an old saying in medicine, you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you don't know it, then you're gonna miss it. So the more you see, the more you do, the more patients you treat in residency, the better off and the better prepared you'll be.
For those cases where you're like...
For those cases, yeah. So for me, med school was going through the motions, was not... it was tough because it was time consuming and it just controlled your absolute life. But it wasn't tough because it's like, oh man, I do not get this concept. It was just tough because, as I was saying earlier, it is just an absolute wealth of knowledge. And you feel like you are back in your parents' house and they're just controlling everything you do. They say, no, you study for this now. This test is this time. Your lab is this time. I mean, you have basically like, you're a fourth grader and you have a little calendar on your refrigerator and people are telling you what to do every night, essentially. Eat, shit, sleep, medicine. Residency a little bit different, a lot more hours, but a lot more fun.
And with the switch, so you said in the future it would be less classes and possibly shift to more getting into residency or into a path sooner.
Yeah, that would be like the European type route.
European type, and that's more, that'll be implemented here possibly in the next...
It could. I see it more so being the other way around, to where they just say, hey, we actually know this much more about the body and this much more about this specialty, so we actually need to have you study for another month about it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. And the only reason why I say that is more like politic-wise, med schools are... I don't know of any for-profit medical school that would say, oh yeah, for sure, let's cut med school down to 3 years instead of 4 years. We're totally fine with, letting 200 students every year take $60,000 off our books. So
yeah,
that's why I don't think that'll happen.
And compared to here in Europe, would you say that those programs do prepare you more? Is there an argument towards that?
Without
trying
to, if I don't know many people that have matriculated over. I do know a few people. The way it works is, say you were a physician. For example, I know a cardiologist that was a cardiologist in Egypt, and he did an Egyptian pathway, which is essentially he became a doctor in about 6 years or so, undergrad and medical school, and became a cardiologist. When he came here, compared to our medicine, he felt vastly underprepared for it. So there is that aspect, but you also have to take both cultures, right? Egyptian cardiology, maybe he's treating in a different culture than we're treating, and they just do things a little bit different. So his standards of care in Egypt are a lot different than our standards of care. So I'm not saying that he's underprepared. He's prepared for his situation and his culture and his geography. That's all.
Gotcha.
There's mid-levels, nurse practitioners and physician assistants, and they go on a pathway of undergrad and a few years of PA school or nurse practitioner school. They are more like what I would consider like the European type route, where they're very focused. So when I work with physician assistants in the emergency department, they act as independent mid-level providers. So they see patients on their own, they write their own notes, they discharge or admit their own patients. They're essentially acting like an ER physician, but they just had that scope of practice. They said, okay, I want to do emergency medicine. They basically focused on that, and that's it. So.
Yeah. One of my good friends in Dayton, Ohio, she was in PA school, or still is. I think she has another year or maybe one more semester. And from what I saw from her time studying stuff, it seems like PAs do almost everything, near everything,
essentially
in med school or ER doc. And her program was accelerated. It was like a 2-year program.
Okay. So she had no summer essentially.
She was
through
just dying at all times. Yeah.
I personally love mid-levels. That's because I work in the emergency department, and they're very, very, very valued. Excuse me. They're very valued in the emergency department. There's no way to staff an emergency department because of the way politics and insurance works with multiple physicians. So they bridge that gap of, hey, we're swamped in here, but insurance companies or the hospital doesn't want to pay for an extra physician. Well, we can get a mid-level and they can take care of patients as well. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So would having more doctors in the ER, PA, or mid-levels, would that help with when the hospital's overflowed or you have too many patients?
Yeah, so it's a little bit tricky. If I could, so the place I work at right now, we're what's called double coverage. So there's always 2 ER docs on. So there's 24 hours in a day. We have double coverage, 12-hour shifts. So that means that we have 48 hours of physician covers, right? We also have 48 hours of PA coverage. And so you're talking about, hey, should we just add more physicians into the ER if you think you need more? Well, there's this fine line that insurance and what healthcare and what hospital administration says. Well, the ER, healthcare is a business, right? At least in our country, unfortunately. If you make or see this amount of patients, we're only going to staff for this amount. And they have these numbers and algorithms that say, okay, the average ER doctor in America sees 1.8 patients an hour. That's considered safe. And so we're going to staff it for that. So they take your yearly visits, they divide it by how many days there are in the year, and they divide it by how many hours, and they say this is how much we need. And they bridge the gap with physician assistants. So you can't, kind of answer your question half-assly, is you can't just say, hey, we need another doctor on today kind of deal. There's these set numbers, and it's out of our control, unfortunately. Do I feel overwhelmed in the ER sometimes? Hell yeah. I mean, I can, all of a sudden I have 0 in the waiting room, and 4 minutes later, what we call the bus gets dropped off, 10 people dump into the waiting room, and it's like 10 patients in 10 minutes I have to see. And, some of them are sick, most of them aren't, and that's how it is. But that's part of your training and what you deal with, at least in emergency medicine.
Because the few times I've been to the ER room for whatever, I always see, you see the doctor for 2 minutes, and then they get called off and they have something else or something bigger, and I'm like, that's fine, I'm not dying. But yeah, it seems that you guys do get pretty overwhelmed at times.
Yeah.
And speaking of waiting times, and physicians, and you talking about the politics of it, I know one of the big contentious issues in this country right now is single payer, going into a Medicare for all.
Right.
From your eyes, from your view of being in the industry, being a doctor for how many years have you been on residency?
4.
4 years.
Yeah.
Where do you see that helping our country? Do you see that it's a viable option? And dealing with patient care, your number one priority is you want to be able to help everyone you can.
Sure.
Is single payer, Medicare for all, European type systems, do you see that being implemented?
So I don't ever see that being implemented, just because insurance has their hands in everything. Our GDP is insane for, comparative to what we spend on healthcare, right? I think it's like the 3rd largest thing we spend is healthcare, and yet we're not any healthier than the rest of the world. And we spend triple what the rest of the world spends, which is insane, right? And a lot of that has to do with just insurance rates and what people charge and what things go on in the hospital. Do I think a single payer will ever happen? It could, but it's not anytime soon. Do I think it would benefit? It's hard for me to say personally. So I'm a little bit of an anomaly when it comes to a physician because I'm in the emergency medicine. So politics aside, whatever you are, I'll just use a quote or paraphrase a quote. George Bush had said, and the reason why he was against universal health care was because he said, we already have universal health care. It's called the emergency department. So we are, and I know this is, a podcast about, medicine in general and the pathway, but obviously most of my experiences are through the emergency room. So, he said that's our safety net. And if you are sick, you don't have insurance, you don't know where to go, where do you go? You go to the emergency department. Is that cost effective? Fuck no.
No.
I'm one of the most expensive physicians to see. You get an overnight stay at a hospital and get a routine appendectomy, you're probably looking at insurance covering, if you have insurance and the bill and everything is done, you're paying a copay, right? If you don't have insurance, you're probably looking at an overnight stay as $2,000 for a room. It's probably a $12,000-$15,000 ordeal to get your appendix out. That means admission, surgery, medicines, things of that nature, right? To see me in the emergency department for something acute like chest pain, my bill, and this is not what I get as a payment, this is what the hospital bills, is probably $6,000 or $7,000. We are one of the most expensive things, right? The hospital bills so high for it because they just don't get the money back. They don't recoup. The majority of people that come to the emergency department are there because they don't have primary care doctors, they don't have health insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is the hospital going to bill for it? Well, they don't. They try to get you in a Medicare program, Medicaid program, and try to recoup some money for that. They jack up the prices essentially and say, hey, Medicare, this is what we're charging for this. Medicare or Medicaid comes back and says, tough shit, this is what we're giving you for this. And then it's this vicious cycle of, all right, well, hospitals are going to say the routine administration of a Tylenol by a nurse is $100 to give that Tylenol to a patient. Well, now we're going to make it, it costs $200 to do that, so that Medicare can reimburse us a little bit more money. So it's a back and forth. So I don't feel that single payer will probably happen anytime soon because of that insurance issue. Do I think it's a good idea? I do. I wasn't the biggest proponent of Obamacare, but that's because I felt that the people that were going to end up having to pay the higher premiums for it were they said it was going to be the very ultra wealthy that did it, but it ended up falling on lower middle class and middle class populations. So blue collar workers that had 3 kids and a family, wife that stayed at home, and the husband makes $60,000 or $70,000 a year as a plumber, all of a sudden sees his health insurance raise up by $3,000 a year. That's not feasible for a family of 4 or 5 with one income going on to cover everyone else. It's a nice thing that could happen, but I feel like the money has to come from somewhere else. The only way that I think the money can come from somewhere else is by lowering healthcare costs. How the hell do we do that? Good luck, man. Everyone's bashing physicians and saying, well, we get paid too much and that's where the costs come from. But if you look at the statistics, physicians only account for about 2 to I could be wrong on these quotes, but under 5% of the general healthcare cost. The majority of cost is administration. So what has healthcare been doing? They've been creating administration jobs at an exponential rate compared to physician jobs. So we're actually not solving the problem. We're just throwing more administrators. So we're throwing bad money after good money.
That is interesting. I know when I went to Illinois State for a little while, I knew so many people going to healthcare administration. Like, it's so many people. Yeah. I'm like, what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, just, backlogs, blah, 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 counting everything, but in the healthcare industry, working for a hospital. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I did see a lot of people doing
it's, that. I mean, it's, I don't want to say a hot job, but it's just one of the rapidly growing jobs. And that's essentially because they're trying to regulate healthcare. And with Obamacare that came out, there was all these changes. And so hospitals were like, well, shit, we're not getting paid anymore with these new rules. We have to figure out how to get paid. So what do? They hired more administrators. Right, and administrators take up the majority. There's many other reasons as why healthcare costs so effing much in this country, but just to go back to that argument as far as like physician pay versus well, that's the main thing when you hear how do we cut costs. The main thing people say is one of two things: physicians get paid too much and medicines cost too much, and it's simply not true for the majority of that. Yeah, physicians do get paid a lot of money, but as I said, it's delayed gratification, and we can talk about money and finances, in a little bit. And yeah, medicine costs a shit ton of money too. And there's those hypersensitive media cases, such as the guy that got thrown in jail because he jacked up EpiPens, exponentially. When he got the patent, that guy's an asshole, and he deserved to go to jail. But the majority of medicines cost what they cost because it's 10 to 12 years of research and development that a company put hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into to research and develop that drug. And then they, unfortunately, it's a business. As I said, they need to turn a profit. Now, do I think pharmaceutical profits are insane? Yeah. I mean, if you want to regulate and cut down costs, I would say government regulate pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
The reason I brought that up is, Bernie Sanders, our generation, very big. You're making Bernie very upset by saying that you're not sure if we'll be going into that system. But yeah, I wanted to get your take on being on the front lines from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I'm a little bit of an anomaly because actually by law, I'm not allowed to go and say, hey, Stephen Maisko, I see you're here for foreign body in an area. I'm your doctor and I'll be taking care of you. But first, let me check your insurance. Oh, you don't have insurance. Fuck you. Goodbye. I can't do that as an emergency medicine physician. So I'm a little bit of an anomaly as far as that goes. I don't bill patients. I don't look at insurance. I don't care. You come to my ER, I see you, I say hello, I treat you, and I either discharge you or admit you or I transfer you. That's what I do. My friends that are more in private practice, like ophthalmology, my buddy that's in pain management or anesthesia, they have to bill, they have to talk to insurance companies, they have to fight to get things approved and stuff like that. And they just say it's an absolute nightmare and they all want universal health care. The majority of doctors want some sort of universal health care. It's just we are the ones that are kind of getting attacked saying, well, you're the reason why you don't want it. It's actually not true. It's big business, insurance companies and administration, healthcare administration, hospitals.
Gotcha. I mean, this could turn into an hour-long talk. About
yeah, so
the
whole sidebar.
That's why. Yeah,
that's why I was like, not to get into politics and stuff like that. That's just my personal, thing. It's a little bit tough for me to even comment on because I see you and I treat you. That's what I'm supposed to do.
Which is, the moral, ethical,
and that's what every doctor wants to do is meet you and treat you. That's what we came to do. It's just healthcare decided to throw a shit ton of hurdles at us, red tape and bureaucracy, to not allow us to do that. So
gotcha. Yeah, maybe one day in our lifetime we'll see that, but until then we're gonna keep going with the system I guess we have for now,
unfortunately.
So getting back, that was a big roundabout.
I feel like this has been a bunch of roundabouts, but
that's
such
what
a
most
broad
of these
fucking topic. So
it's broad talk. Most of anything my ADD takes me to wherever. I don't know if you listened to the second episode. It was just pure.
I hadn't listened to the second one yet. No.
What the fuck, man? The shit. Well, you and a lot of people. I have YouTube analytics. I'm going to talk about the next episode. It'll be fun. But the average watch time is 5 minutes, 50 seconds.
That's better than me. Yeah.
Which it's funny because I'll have 200 views. I'm like, shit, fuck yeah. And it'll be 1,900 hours of listening time. And then I'm like, oh, if you just divide that out, most people watched my intro, 2 minutes of me talking with Matt, and they said, So hopefully you are bringing interesting perspectives to the medical field and people want to listen to us ramble. But getting back to ER, one of the things I find interesting about your job is just the cases that come in. So one of them you talked about, having a case that you don't, it's something you see kind of for the first time, or you don't know if you're picking up on the right things for the patient complaining about pain or wherever else. What are some of the hardest cases that you've dealt with? It's mystery cases that Dr. House coming in and
put me on the spot trying to think of mystery cases. I would say the thing,
or does that even happen? Dr. House is the most ridiculous.
No, Dr. House,
awesome show.
I guess if you're in a tertiary center and you got transferred after 4 months of not figuring something out, sure, you'll go to Dr. House. But I would say the ER is more what we call organized chaos. It's a very chaotic environment. There's shit happening all around you. I usually receive, I think, around 70 phone calls in a 10-hour shift. So that's about 7 phone calls an hour to speak to doctors. I get interrupted. There's different stats on this, but I get what we say interrupted because it's an interruption of what you're doing. But I get interrupted by either a nurse or a tech or a patient or a phone call on average every 2 to 3 minutes in the emergency department. So it's organized chaos. I have to basically say, hey, are there any crashing patients right now? No? Okay, good. I can go do some charting. what I would say for me, interesting cases, if you're interested in emergency medicine, are not like Dr. House cases, are more like, oh shit, did that happen, right? It's, essentially, I've worked in a multitude of different ERs, probably like 6 or 7 now. And I've worked in freestanding rural places where I've had, Amish population come in, and they wait till their kid is essentially dead before they bring them in because they just don't believe in modern medicine. An example of that was I had a child where they were building a barn, and the barn wall, which was around 20 feet, probably a couple tons, fell onto this 12-year-old kid helping it, and they left him there for 2 days, and they just gave him water while he was under there until they were able to get him out, essentially, and dig him out. Never called for help, and brought this kid in, and I mean, he was essentially on death's door. And in my mind, I can't even fathom that, because I've also seen patients on the other spectrum that come in and state that their paper cut really hurts and they want me to fix it. So it's just an organized chaos. It's basically triage medicine in the emergency department. I can be having a great day drinking a coffee, bullshitting with a nurse about a funny case or something like that, and I hear the squad call go off, and the squad call says, multiple gunshot wound to the chest, patient unresponsive, coming in now. And I go from drinking my coffee and joking to, oh shit, time to gear up, get in the room, it's time to hopefully save this person's life, right? Interesting? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more barbaric and brutal is what I deal with in the emergency department. I am a jack of all trades, a renaissance man of nothing. So I know how to treat your heart attack initially and then get you to the cardiologist so he can definitively fix it. I know how to fix your broken bone and put it back into place, but then you're going to have to go see orthopedics and get surgery, essentially. My profession, specialty, I should say, our biggest thing is protect the airway. I repeat, protect the fucking airway. So if you are in the emergency department and you are not breathing, my job is to make you fucking breathe again. Plain and simple. All right. Now, there's millions of reasons why you can't breathe. You have too much fluid on your lungs. You're having a heart attack. You got shot in the lungs. You just basically did an overdose of heroin and you're not breathing. That's our mainstay, is get them breathing again. Everything else is bread and butter. I don't know.
I mean, what you do, you are a human body magician. The things you see, have to treat initially. I remember you told me stories about like gunshot to like the stomach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff down there.
Yeah, and essentially for me, right, like I was saying, it's triage. So I have a patient that comes in. Example, actually, I just had I had a gunshot to the chest 3 days ago. And a young gentleman, gang-related case, shot to the right side of the chest, but it was basically at the border of his ribs and his abdomen. So I don't know if he's filling up blood in his abdomen or if he's filling up blood in his chest. What I did know is that he wasn't breathing. So when you have a penetrating trauma to the chest, you usually have what's called a pneumothorax or a collapsed lung. So for me, it's what's called ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. I need to check his airway first. He has a patent airway. I can get a tube down there and make him breathe, right? Breathing is the next thing. Why is this man not breathing? Well, his lung collapse. I need to get a chest tube in this guy, so I have to do a chest tube in 30 seconds, make his lung re-expand, and then worry about circulation. Hey, does he have a pulse and everything else going on? That all happens simultaneously in what we call in the emergency department flow. I mean, you were just in the fucking flow at that time. The best cases that an emergency physician has are those type of cases, because that's what we're there for, a true emergency, right? It's to say, holy shit, that guy's dying, that lady's about to die, or in the next day, they're probably going to die if I don't do something right now. The rest of it is, hey, we're here, like Bush said, we're your safety net. I have abdominal pain for 3 days, it's probably gastroenteritis or something like that, right? It's 80% BS, 10% probably going to be pretty bad if you don't do something in the next 24 hours, and the other 10%, oh shit, they're gonna die right now if you don't do anything. Yeah. So not interesting, just chaos. I mean, actually have a shit ton of interesting cases.
Some interesting cases.
Not house cases.
My favorite. If there's, well, you. There's one story I want. Foot story. You know what I'm talking about.
The fall off.
Yeah. That one's great. And then also a weird thing I talked to many people, including you, and you've brought me the brunt of these stories, is just people getting stuff stuck in their butts.
Yeah, there's a lot of butt stuff in the ER.
There's a lot of butt things.
So there's an old adage.
This episode, we talked about, for some reason, a lot of my conversations turned into butt stuff.
That's okay.
I don't know. It's just something about me that just...
Some sort of Freudian thing.
Yeah, it probably. Just things with butts.
Yeah, so there's...
I'm going to open this. It's going to be... Sorry. Do you want a sip of this before anything? You sure? Yeah. All right. Clean out the bottles. Go on.
There's an old adage in the emergency department that we have what's called a tracking board. So you see patients and their names and their main complaints. So you'll say like Stephen Mysko, finger pain, 25-year-old male. You 25 now?
26.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm dying basically.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
But then you'll see another patient will be like John Smith, 33 years old, foreign body in ear. So you know there's a foreign body in the ear, maybe a bug or something. But then you'll see Jane Smith. Yeah. Jane Smith, foreign body, and it won't say anything else because they don't want to tell a bunch of people what's going on until they get to the back of the room. They have to talk to nurses, triage this and that. So whenever I just see foreign body as the chief complaint, I already know it's somewhere stuck where it shouldn't be, and it's usually the rectum. I've taken out USB drives, recently a police mag light, a racquetball, an apple. Some of these I'm listing have had to go to surgery. I couldn't do them on my own.
Dude, the butt can take a lot.
It can.
That's a lot of girth.
The question I always get for the youngins, when you get an 18-year-old kid that just stuck up, an 18-inch mag light up his butt. The parents are usually a little bit worried and don't understand what's going on and think that this is all new and that he's never done it before. And I'm just like, oh yeah, he's probably just experimenting. It's okay, this and that. But in my head, if you got an 18-inch mag light up there, you've been doing this for a while. You don't just start with the mag light. You graduate to it, kind of deal.
0 to 100.
But I just don't tell the parents that.
Give them a little nudge. I got you.
Yeah. Retained tampon is something I deal with a lot. I don't ever want a vagina or a period, so I don't know how you ladies out there deal with it, but I do take out a lot of retained tampons. I guess they just
in there for a while.
They just get there. Yeah. There's actually something very bad called toxic shock syndrome. Mm-hmm. It's an acute infection that you can get really bad, but. Yeah, you name it, I've probably taken it out. Cans of soda, that's a pretty common one too.
Sniper barrel.
Sniper barrel.
That was a old husband and wife.
Yeah. I had a guy that this is like not like it's like not like PG or
yeah. Well, since only people get 6 minutes through, we're fine. No, PG. No, this is not PG.
A guy had recently went through a divorce with his wife and decided he was going to fuck his wedding ring. So he decided to put his wedding ring on his penis and then begin to masturbate, and it got hard and it got stuck, and we as an ER doctor, that's what I'm talking about. You don't know what the fuck's coming in, right? And so how do you remove a
how
ring
is that the one thing that you're like,
penis,
fuck
yeah.
this woman, I'm gonna fuck the ring?
Yeah, it's an odd thing, right? The guy wasn't erect when he came in, but there was just so much swelling and edema from this constricting ring on there that there was no other way to do it other than to cut it off. And I had to call the janitorial service and be like, bring your toolbox. We don't have a ring cutter or anything strong enough to cut this fucking ring. And I had to use pliers from a janitor toolbox after I obviously sterilized them and cleaned them.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just very, very odd things. So.
And it's, a lot of these things are 1 in a million, 1 in a 10 million chance of these things happening. But the interesting thing about your job is when those 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, 1 in 100 million things happen, they go to you.
Yeah. And
so
that's
you see all those weird things. You're like, how does that happen? And you're just like, well, I don't know, but I see them happen every day.
That's why I fell in love with it, essentially, when I was in med school doing my rotations, was because I initially wanted to do cardiology, and then I said, no way, after I studied first year for it. And then I was like, I like family medicine. I want to do primary care. But I didn't like the aspect of like having an office, overhead, staff, and kind of treating the same thing, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes every day. So when I got into the ER, as well am very like ADD. I was just like, holy shit, there's something new every day. And the majority of my cases that I see in the ER, your typical, the most common thing is belly pain. Actually, what people check in for in the emergency department, belly pain, chest pain, back pain, or bone injury are probably like the top 4 things that people come in for. So I just see that all day long, and those are essentially, lack of better words, boring to me, or just routine to me, I guess. There's maybe some like odd zebra cases that I'll see with those. It's the other stuff that really like I enjoy. I enjoy the trauma. I enjoy the oddball stuff. It takes a certain type of person in the emergency department. If you hear nurses and physicians laughing when you're in the emergency department, it's not because they're assholes and they're cynical. It's because that's how we deal with all the chaos and the stress. We just have to kind of laugh things off all the time. Otherwise, you would just get really fucking burned out in the ER.
Yeah.
I just remembered, we didn't talk too much about residency. We went from med school to politics right off the bat.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
If you want. If not, no.
I mean, no. Residency definitely is important. Yeah, go ahead.
I can do a 2-minute spiel for it.
Go for it.
It's a shit ton of work. It's hours upon hours upon hours. You learn how to become a physician when you are essentially half asleep. I was the last year for interns, which is your first year of residency, to have the crazy work hours. So I did what's called Q 30 hours every 3 days. That means I worked for 30 hours every 3 days. So say it's Monday, I would show up at Monday at 7 o'clock. I would leave the hospital at Tuesday at 1 p.m. And then I would go home and I would sleep, and I'd have to be there the next day at 7 o'clock. And I would do 2 regular days. And then on the third day, I'd have to do another 30-hour shift. And you would do that 6 days a week for an entire effing year. But what it did was it trained me. Like I was saying, med school prepared me for the language. Residency essentially prepared me how to treat a patient and how to essentially triage and say, okay, this patient's sick or not sick, what do I do about it, or where do I need to get them to go? And it trained me to do it in my sleep, essentially. So like when my wife doesn't get any sleep, she is just all over the place. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's very tired. She can't figure out things. She's not on her game. For me, I could get 2 hours of sleep and just be completely fine and still go through the motions. I think that's just because I live with that perpetual insomnia, and that came from residency. Example is me coming off a night shift and coming to do this after 3 hours of sleep.
Oh, thank you. So what about the argument having more docs, PAs, physicians on floor? Because I've heard the best time to see a doctor is at the beginning of their shift, beginning half of their shift.
Yeah.
Because just like with any job, anyone staying up, you get burnt out, you're tired. Mistakes can be made if it comes to that. So would there be an argument for having more doctors? Has that been an argument set?
So as I was saying, there was like
is there something where there are more mistakes?
Yeah, and there was a lot of studies into that, and that's why I was saying I was the last year that did 30-hour shifts, or 30-hour shifts for a year, essentially. The work laws came out and said residents cannot do these shifts anymore. There's too many medical mistakes. We're showing that these medical mistakes are happening after like hour 10, hour 12. We need to cut this down, so we need more relief. So they would add more residents for more hour times in that zone to get more relief. But that's a double-edged sword. So if I'm taking care of a patient for the entire 30 hours, I know everything about that patient, versus I take care of that patient only for 12 hours and then I sign that patient out to a new person. I'm like, hey, you have 5 new admits to go, and by the way, here's 6 patients that I saw earlier and they need this, this, and this, and this. You're kind of walking into what we call a used patient. So I'm just giving you a bunch of stuff to do and you know nothing about the patient. You didn't see him. And when you walk into that room, you already have tunnel vision of, okay, this guy's here for chest pain. So you may miss something because you didn't realize it. So there's pluses and minuses to it. Overall, I fucking hated my life intern year. Thank God Kate didn't live with me at that time. We were long distance. She was in grad school, because I was probably the most miserable in my life because of those hours. Would I trade it and do it over again with the night float instead of the 30 hours? Fuck no. I learned my most my intern year. My intern year trained me to be the physician that I am. So I personally think those work hours, maybe not 30 hours, but maybe 24 hours, something like that, or a dedicated 2-hour break with no patient care in between 30 hours is beneficial. I personally didn't like when I heard they were changing work laws to lower hours.
Okay.
I just felt my experience with it was brutal but necessary.
So when's the best time to injure myself and go to the hospital?
So the best time to see a physician in an office is usually the third or fourth appointment in the morning. Don't be the first appointment. Everyone's like, oh, I'll get in and out. No, because the office staff always starts late. Everyone's gabbing. People are eating bagels. So usually the third or fourth patient rolling, or the third or fourth patient after lunchtime. Usually don't be the first after lunch, because lunches always run late. There's drug reps, things of that nature, and people just want extra lunch, or they're catching up on paperwork, or they're catching up because they're behind in the morning. As far as the emergency department, I can't tell you, man. If you need to go to the emergency department, fucking go to the emergency department.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking that next time I want to put something in my butt, I just need to know when, if anything goes wrong.
I would say if you're going to do butt stuff, do it at nighttime at least, because usually night nurses see
Who does butt stuff during the day?
Nights. Exactly.
That's weird.
Usually they see it more often.
Always a night activity.
It's usually, they usually see it more often because it's a night activity, so they have more experience with it.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, there's no like
thanks, Eddie.
time.
This is why I need you around my life.
There's people say don't go to a hospital in July because of all the new interns that come out in July, so there's medical mistakes. There's been studies that do show that. You have to think about everything with that. There's new doctors, there's new nurses that are graduating nursing school, so there have been statistics that show June and July are like the worst months to be admitted to a hospital, so I guess don't get sick in June or July.
All right, so July, no butt stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What trends do you see? One of the biggest things right now is opiates.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you have a lot of experience with synthetic weed, people just fucking mauling people's faces off, insane stories, opiates, overdoses. Has that been in the last 4 years or since you started residency into being ER?
Yeah, so in residency, in med school, I barely saw it, if at all. In residency, I did it in Cleveland. There's a town called Portsmouth, Ohio in Cleveland. It's a very, very small town in Ohio. I didn't work there, but just to kind of give you the overall picture of Northeast Ohio, Portsmouth has per capita the highest death rate per opiate use in the entire United States. Ohio has one of the highest opiate addiction rates in the entire United States. So when I did residency in Ohio, my first 2 years, I was in a well-to-do community hospital place. I didn't see a whole lot, but your second 2 years in residency, you actually branch out to other hospitals so you can see how like other places do things. And so I was on, more of the inner city Cleveland area, and I saw opiates probably twice or 3 times a night. I would see an opiate kind of either addiction or someone trying to get pain medications out of me with like a bogus story or an actual overdose. When I started doing residency, when I started as an attending physician in 2014, I worked at a rather large tertiary center hospital, and I would probably see 5 to 6, sometimes 10 opiate or some sort of drug abuse every day, whether it be I need detox, I need help, or just straight up overdose. They were dead on the ground, and the cop gave them opiate reducing medicine called Narcan, and brought them back to life essentially, and they came there, or people that just ended up not making it. The crisis has been pretty bad, very, very bad. I work at a hospital now where pain pills aren't a thing. My last hospital in Cleveland, pain pills were the thing. I had a lot of drug seekers come in, give me a bogus complaint, and I saw that they were here 30 times in the last 3 months with bogus complaints. And then you can look up people's opiate use, and you can say, hey man, I know you're fishing for drugs. I have to call the DEA on you. That's how bad it is. I call the DEA in the emergency department, start a case file. The new place I'm at, pills are not a problem. Heroin is the problem where I'm at now. Last night, my overnight shift, I can think of 4 off the top of my head in a 12-hour shift that were overdoses that were essentially dead blue and CPR was started, and then they were brought to the hospital. And I can think of probably another 3 that were there for some sort of like polysubstance abuse. So huge crisis. When I was an intern, and I would write pain medications for someone with a sprain or a broken bone. I would give them 20 Percocet or 20 Vicodin or 20 Norco. I have changed my practice, as many physicians have. I give you 2 days worth. You need to follow up with another doctor in 2 days to get a reevaluation. So I give you 8 to 10 pain pills, and that's it. And even there's studies that show even after taking 4 consecutive pain pills, you have about a double chance risk of being addicted to them. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
To think about. So there's a lot of talk about what we should do and how we should cut down on opiate use. I don't know what we can do for legislation, to be quite honest, because you need to treat pain. There's something called the Press-Ganey score. It's a patient satisfaction score. And so I come and see you. You actually get a survey in 2 weeks in the ER, from the ER, that says, how was Dr. Richter? Did he treat your pain? That's the number one question. And if someone says he did not treat my pain appropriately, I actually get a bad score. And then the hospital actually gets reimbursed less for that. So there's actually this adage to almost give people pain medications to make them happy and snowed, right? If you think about it. But as a physician, you're like, well, I don't care about that damn Press-Ganey score. I do not want to give them opiates. Give me a bad score. There's a lot of legislation right now that's trying to cut the pain scale out of that Press-Ganey satisfaction score. And another sidebar to that is that satisfaction score is eventually going to be related to physician salary too. So now you're talking about exactly how fucked up
you're just
is
going to
that?
have to fucking sell drugs to everyone.
It's essentially like, well, you have a pain seeker that didn't get medications that now gets a survey and says, fuck that doctor, he gets a 1 out of 10.
And any pharmaceutical rep that comes in is just going to have a field day.
Give him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of, we're in a catch-22 where we want to do what's right for the patient and not give someone pain medications, but then we would get a bad Press-Ganey score, and then the hospital doesn't get paid, and eventually maybe the physician doesn't get paid for that. You would like to think that most physicians would say, F that, I don't care, but I can see a lot of physicians saying, well, my hands are tied, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Right. A big thing with, I see a lot of my friends posting about are CBD, weed, and like replacing pain pills. Like you said, like we can't get rid of pain pills. Like, and I just think of like, imagine, like my mom when she was sick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell her to go smoke some weed or keep on, patches, having morphine patches and stuff. She'd be like, F that, give me the medication, give me morphine. Or I've friends who are just like, weed will just replace it, I'll just smoke weed. I'm like, let me snap your wrist. And then tell me if you want, 20 grams or milligrams, whatever, of Vicodin, or smoke some weed. Yeah. I know what you're gonna be.
You're right. I mean, pain pills are a necessity, 100%. Yeah. There's never been a shift where I haven't written a prescription for a pain med. Period. I mean, that would be impossible for me to do. Essentially.
Well, why don't you just give them some CBD oil?
There's studies out there that talk about pain control and stuff, but I mean, for the most part, they're studies that are more for chronic pain. Treating it for acute pain, they're very far off from that, 100%. Yeah. There's no way I can be like, oh yeah, here's some edibles for your broken bone.
No.
I mean,
fuck that. I'd be like, shoot me up with some morphine.
Exactly.
I'm getting out of the situation. I'm escaping that pain.
That's it just reminds me of like hemp hippies, I guess. I don't know.
Dude, that's just unrealistic. Like a quarter of my friends on Facebook. I always just see like, if you're depressed, just go outside and enjoy nature. I'm like, then you have to go back inside and live your life. It's not just an escape. You broke your knee. Just here's some CBD oil. Just rub it right here, and you're good.
I love how your hippie is like a 30-year-old kind of flamboyant guy.
I don't know what
who may or may not do butt stuff.
My alter ego. I'm almost 30. I'm 26. I might as well. I'm already, I don't know why. That's always my voice. I just talk like this. My name's Steven, and I study statistics.
That's good.
And I don't know. Whenever I mock people, I don't know why I do that voice. So those are, with drugs. I know we've talked about this before. Like, what do we do about opiates? And you're at a little.
I don't have an answer. I just am personally writing less of them, and I hope my colleagues are too. And the only other thing I do is I give a opiate prescription pamphlet that says this is addictive. I go through every patient. I say, I'm giving you ibuprofen. I want you to take ibuprofen and Tylenol. Only if the pain isn't better with those two medications, then you should take this medication. Use it sparingly. I'm only giving you 2 days worth. It can kill you. It can be addictive. It can ruin lives. Verbatim, that's what I say, actually. That's my personal stance. What do we do from like a policy standpoint? I have no idea.
What do you think would happen? I'm a proponent of this idea. What if we, this is again the politics of the drug war and everything, but like, what if we just legalized everything? Weed, coke, meth, LSD, shrooms. My argument towards this is I'm not going to go shoot up heroin tomorrow. I'm not going to change my habits towards, I don't know, but my habits towards coke or weed aren't going to change any more than they do now. Anyone that wants to go out on their, Thursday through Saturday night benders while they work and they're stressed with their life, they're going to go find cocaine somewhere.
Sure.
They're going to smoke weed every day. They're going to go shoot up or do whatever. Do you think that would be a...
No. So what's the difference, right? You're saying you're never going to shoot up heroin.
Right. If it was just legal, I wouldn't.
But the person that's shooting up heroin now illegally, is it going to change if they're doing it legally or illegally? No, they're still going to do it.
They're still going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's my argument.
For me, legalizing it, the only thing that would benefit from legalizing it would be two things. One, the drug itself can be regulated. So there was just a bad strain of what's called fentanyl. It's a very, very, very powerful opiate. It was actually fentanyl for animals, zoo animals, essentially. Strength or grade, and I was just having a ton of overdoses where these people were just dead. That's it. You couldn't bring them back no matter how much of that Narcan that you gave them. So regulation of the drug itself, an FDA of sorts that says, okay, this is how much opiate is in this medicine, or this is how pure this cocaine is. Sure, that I think would be beneficial. And then two, taxation. One, taxation would help with overall costs. When we're getting more taxes, maybe throw that tax to healthcare. Essentially like what we do with tobacco and alcohol, right? We have a sin tax, and that sin tax is used for public funding for schools and whatever they use it for. The taxation could also be then used for like addiction and stuff like that. But as far as like stopping the problem, no. If you do heroin now and then they legalize it, you're gonna do heroin anyways.
And that's my argument towards legalizing.
I think that's a whole different topic to where the only thing that's gonna do is just de-institutionalize people in prison essentially, because it becomes not a crime essentially. That's it. But as far as healthcare standpoint, I'm still gonna have to deal with the heroin overdose, whether you got it illegally or you got it legally.
I know in Sweden and other countries they have programs where they keep people off the street and they see over time that people become less addicted if there's controlled, regulated, go to clinics where they can intravenously inject it into you safely. Didn't they do that in LA? Or no, it was California or somewhere. This was like in the 2000s.
I'm not sure about like a particular injection, but there's something called methadone and Suboxone, and there's methadone and Suboxone clinics everywhere. So I come in, hey, my name is Richter. I am addicted to pain pills and heroin. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired of the danger of buying it off of a dealer. I need to get off of this, but I need something to maintain it. There's something called Suboxone or methadone, and they bind to the same receptors and they act to stop that dope sickness that you get or heroin withdrawal that you would get, and it comes from a licensed physician and he monitors you and follows you.
Those are abused too as well, right?
They are, so that's a problem. The hope is that you would eventually wean off of those. The problem is people don't wean off of them. They just substituted an illegal drug dealer for essentially a controlled substance that's being prescribed by a physician. At least it's under the watch of a physician, I guess. But we have those programs. I don't see much about it.
I want to say somewhere, I remember reading it in the United States, we did that. We controlled the dose, and we allowed heroin addicts and opiate addicts go in. And they found that, if you safely shot up with a controlled amount, and over time people actually became less addicted, less people out coming into the ER, less transmission of diseases through needles and sharing.
Yeah, Florida had a needle program to where if you were hooked, because Florida also has a very big HIV/AIDS population, so if you were hooked in Florida, you can actually walk into certain clinics and say, hey, I'm addicted, I need clean needles, and they would give them to you for free, taxpayer dollars essentially providing that. So imagine me saying that to some blue-collar worker, hey, by the way, part of your taxes are going for free clean needles for drug addicts. How do you get that policy right? Like, it's just tough.
But they just see that as black and white.
I agree.
I'm putting money in taxes and it's going to needles, but it's like, okay, but also you're having less sick people going to the hospital, in which Medicaid and Medicare is going to have to pay for.
Agree.
It's the same thing with. You can get into contraceptives, or abortion, or condoms, anything like that, birth control. yeah, it's like people see it as, oh, this politician doesn't want any taxpayer money, anything going into sexual education. They just want abstinent sex. And then it's like, okay, then you're also going to have a lot of
Right.
kids with mothers and fathers who aren't ready to have babies
that had babies, and then they say, well, they shouldn't have the babies. Well, you're not talking about your situation. You're talking about somebody that may not understand that, or may not understand the dire consequences, I guess, in that situation of an unwanted baby, and then they end up having one,
and then it just becomes a vicious cycle. Poverty, yeah. And then if you didn't do that, well, then who knows where those people would go? Benefit society more. That kid would have a more chance once those parents are ready. But no, I guess we gotta.
A good example to speak on opiates is Narcan right now, which, as I was saying, is a drug reversing agent. There's a lot of in Cleveland and in Illinois, EMS carries Narcan. So if you get called to the scene for possible overdose, an EMS can administer it. A physician doesn't have to administer that medicine. There's certain medicines that EMS can administer, and that's one of them. But in Florida and in I think California too, but I know for Florida, they started selling over-the-counter Narcan. So you can just go to Walgreens and just buy Narcan. You don't need a script. It doesn't need to be anywhere. So people are like, why the fuck would you sell Narcan? Stop them from doing drugs. Well, the reason is we can't get them to stop doing drugs. We've tried detox programs, this and that. At least they don't end up in the hospital and they don't die. If they overdose, they have it on their pocket and a friend knows, or whoever they're using with can give them the Narcan, administer it, and EMS doesn't have to come out, and they go about their merry way. That sounds shitty, right? If you think about the grand scheme of things, like here's your fix for your addiction, just you did too much, next time don't do as much. But what I guess the alternative is, as I said, CPR, ending up in the ER, hospital bills, administration looking down at you, not getting paid, this and that. It all goes back down to like healthcare dollars for that stuff. Yeah. And nobody pays for detox. I mean, if you don't have insurance, I can't get you to detox, essentially. There's a few places in Chicago that I know take no insurance, but there's a few of them, and they are essentially booked for weeks. So if you're a heroin addict and I'm telling you, hey, don't do heroin for 2 weeks until you can get into this program, yeah, right. They get dope sick within 4 or 5 hours of not having heroin. It's just not going to happen. They're going to continue on, go on the street on their merry way, and it's a vicious cycle. That's how it is.
Okay. What about trends you see with the American people? Let's not get off of drugs. Health with diet, or do you see certain cancers more often than not? Maybe you don't really see those in the ER. I guess that
newly diagnosed cancers.
Yeah.
I'll see. I think some of the toughest cases I have, or if you were asking about like not interesting but Dr. House cases, I'll have a 13-year-old kid that just is losing weight. A 13-year-old kid shouldn't lose weight. Mom says he looks a little pale and he's just complaining of like vague abdominal pain or something like that, and I end up diagnosing him with cancer. And for me it's just preliminary. I look at your blood work and I'm like, oh, this kid probably has leukemia, new onset. I don't have much follow-up with them. I transfer them to a tertiary center, essentially. So I figured out what was wrong with them, and then I send them to who can actually treat them, kind of deal. Diet-wise, we live in the Midwest. There's a Midwestern diet, right? Most of our diseases are first-world diseases in the United States. Think about the big three: hypertension, hyperlipidemia, or high cholesterol, and then diabetes. Those three things are essentially because of diet and weight. There's no other reason to have those. With the exception of diabetes, you can have genetic, like type 1 diabetics, where that's more of an issue with the pancreas. But type 2 diabetes, is diet. It's too much carbs, too much sugars, and then your pancreas just burns out and doesn't make insulin anymore, and then you get too much sugar in your body, and then you get hardening of the arteries, and then the hardening of the arteries causes your heart to beat a little bit worse, and then causes a heart attack, and then you also ate a cheeseburger, so there's cholesterol in there, so there's narrowing of the plumbing, and then you have a heart attack and you die. All that because of diet, right?
That sounds like a good diet.
You think about the Mediterranean diet and the people that eat, olive oils and nuts and heavy vegetables and fish diet, and how much better off they are, and that their levels look and their incidence of those diseases versus Midwest diet. We live on processed food here. I'm by no means saying that I'm like a fucking paleo vegan or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
I go out with you.
Exactly. We crush some beers, all carbs, and then we go home and then we have pizza
and tacos.
Exactly.
And then I pass out on your couch, and then it just sits there.
But I mean, if you were able to, for some reason, able to figure out a way to regulate diet, that would be the biggest way, I think, to lower healthcare dollars, essentially, because the majority of shit we deal with is first world diseases. So,
yeah. Okay. We have gone through almost an hour and 20 minutes.
Cool.
Flew by.
Yeah.
You don't really realize it. I've covered most of what I kind of want to cover. You talk the whole time, which I love. You are very, very knowledgeable.
Cool.
In the field that you are in. Some other time I'd like you to come on at some point. Maybe update us on news stories.
Yeah.
You are full of them. We didn't even get to that.
We can do like a whole story time.
We could do a whole story time.
I can't obviously be super specific because of
Yeah.
what's called HIPAA laws and patient confidentiality, but I can, a list of things that I've taken out of butts or just crazy cases that I've had.
There's the one story is I want the foot story, the pizza boy, and my special whole lady.
Yeah, my special whole lady, man, I'll never forget her. Yeah, we can do like a whole spiel. Yeah.
All right. And you had something you wanted to say.
Just first off, if you're interested in medical school and you're, just pre-med path, just make sure it's right for you. Don't do it for the wrong reasons. So don't do it for money, and don't do it for status. Quite frankly, there's not much status to it. So don't do it for that. And also there's not much fucking money for it. Physicians say they get paid a lot, and by all means, I get paid a lot of money to do what I do, but money isn't everything, so don't do it for the money. And there's also something called student loans, so a lot of that. I had more money before med school. You know what I mean? All my money goes to my student loans. So eventually, obviously, that won't be true. There's something called the $1 million mistake. Why becoming a physician is a $1 million mistake. If you read that article, you can Google it, and you are like, oh man, I don't want to do this. Get out of medical school, get out of pre-med right now, because you will burn out in 5 years. If you read that article and you say it's not $1 million mistake, I'm doing this because I want to help people and that's my main objective for doing it, then you're in the right place and continue on your path. Remember delayed gratification as well. It takes a shit ton of time learning, and you're going to have way more lows than you are highs, especially in medical school in your first couple years of residency. So just get through that, have a good social support. Physician suicide is kind of a hot topic right now. If you do feel you're overwhelmed, every medical school does have counselors to talk about that. Talk to your spouse, wife, brothers, sisters, family, friends, coworkers, or fellow students about it. Just get help out there. So one of the things I wanted to harp about with that was suicide hotline. It's 1-800-273-8255. And this is just in general, not with physicians, but we do have a higher rate of suicide for professions compared to other professions. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. There are around 45,000 deaths a year due to suicide. That's 123 people a day. White males make up 70% of it, and it's usually white single males around the age of 35 to 65. So if you do, have any sort of depression type symptoms or suicidal type symptoms, please reach out to somebody, especially the suicide hotline. The only other thing that I kind of wanted to just plug real quick, I have no affiliation with them, I just really love them. It's something called love146.org, so LOVE and then the numbers 146.org. They are a non-for-profit site that handles sex trafficking throughout the world. So there are approximately 30 to 40 billion people that are enslaved throughout the 30 to 40 million people throughout the world that are enslaved, and about 4.5 million of those people globally are sexually exploited. So that means that they are basically sex slaves. 1 in 6 people that are endangered runaways, females between the ages of 14 and 25, run the risk of becoming sex trafficked victims. 80% are female, and to really hit home about this, half of them are children under the age of 16. So think about your younger brother, your sister, and your family members that are young, and think about that life. I want you to check out the website. They do really cool stuff. They do a great amount of fundraising. It's all non-for-profit. And on Christmas time, they do ornaments that you can buy and purchase, and it's just a small donation. It's something that's super underreported. Think of a good example is Lollapalooza. It was estimated that there was over 250,000 sex workers throughout the greater Chicagoland area that came for Lollapalooza, brought in by essentially pimps for festivals, so large festival gatherings and things like that. You see something strange, say something about it. Contact a local police officer. I harp on this because in the emergency department, I do see a lot of, not a lot, but I do see prostitution here and there, and I do see sexual abuse cases, and so it's something that I just could not ever fathom happening to a family member or a future child. So just want you to check it out, love146.org. Cool.
Yeah, go absolutely. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And also thank you so much for taking your time to come on.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe losing some sleep to come on here. It means a lot.
It's all good.
And I really hope everyone out there enjoyed this conversation. Anyone in the medical field or all my friends, I really hope you guys all enjoyed this and took something away from it and learned something.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much, Eddie.
See you.
Goodbye, everyone. Boom.
Oops.